Apologies for the technical difficulty, folks. There was the wrong slide deck. But I think what I was intending to do earlier was to provide some background on who we are as an organization. Darktrace, we were founded back in 2013 with the core goal of leveraging AI to solve problems within cybersecurity. Since then, we've gone on an incredible journey, growing to over 2,000 employees globally with almost 9,000 customers across every industry vertical. Now, along this journey, we've learned a lot of things, namely how cyber incidents have evolved over time. And I know this is the slide that I've already covered, so just glancing past that, talking about things again, highlighting that our adversaries are leveraging AI, it begs the question, are we leveraging AI and are we ensuring that we're tackling the right security challenges with AI? Taking a bit of a step back and framing things from the perspective of cloud. I'm sure it comes as a surprise to, I don't think anyone here, that the cloud has brought us a lot of benefit. The flexibility to be able to create, modify, and destroy resources with the press of a button. The ability to scale resources up and down at a moment's notice. I think these are all some aspects that make it very clear that the cloud is here to stay and the reason why a lot of us are here. But consequently, these same benefits make more or less yield to some very interesting challenges. Thinking about things, this is a question for the audience. For those of you that know for a fact that your cloud environment is architected and designed in the exact same way as someone else, please raise your hand. Now, I highlight this question because when you think about cloud and all the different ways that we can use it, it's very not only dynamic in its nature, but it's very unique and nuanced as we move from organization to organization, from team to team, where things like business objectives, team objectives, and even personal objectives will influence how we design and set up our cloud environments. So then that begs the question, well, what are some of the key areas of concern looking at this? First and foremost, visibility becomes very hard to track because of how dynamic the cloud is. Adding to that, because of all the nuance paired with the different solutions and services available to us, it adds a level of complexity that traditional infrastructure we don't see. And finally, understanding that there's a lot of nuance and uniqueness from cloud to cloud, how we handle these threats also becomes an area of concern, solely because based on all of these different and unique use cases, response usually is very manual in nature in the cloud. Now, how does this compare and how do we think about cloud with the way that we currently approach cloud security? Taking a look at things, a lot of solutions that are currently available today look at cloud security from one of two lenses. Pre-implementation and once I'm in production. But I think the key takeaway here is regardless of what lens you're looking at it from, there's the same problem at its core, where a lot of the time AI isn't part of the picture, and when it is, a lot of the time it's sidelined, added as a side feature rather than a core functionality of the product. So in its essence, a lot of these approaches are very static. And like I've highlighted and emphasized earlier, the cloud is very dynamic and unique and nuanced in how it varies. So understandably, when you apply a general security approach, you encounter a lot of issues. Namely, I'm sure a lot of the security professionals in the audience can agree that risk prioritization is a key responsibility of our jobs. In addition to that, considering that these general approaches don't take into consideration nuance or uniqueness, these general approaches will inundate security professionals, as I'm sure all of you have experienced, with alerts. So then how do we prioritize in an environment that's dynamic like this? That's why I'm here to talk about Darktrace Cloud, where through our self-learning AI, Darktrace Cloud is able to approach and understand your cloud environment holistically. Not just looking at one or two aspects, but truly considering and implementing and incorporating that holistic view from looking at things like resource relationships to identity relationships, and taking that context together, paired with real-time live data to actually turn it into architecture diagrams. I know one of the key things that I mentioned today has been visibility. And visibility starts with context. How we risk prioritize and how we look at prioritization begins and ends with context. Understanding that Darktrace Cloud is able to give that context back to security teams by creating dynamic, real-time updating architecture diagrams based off of all the items that I mentioned earlier. But from that, the AI isn't just presenting the information to teams, but it truly is learning and implementing that learning into the way that Darktrace is able to detect and respond. Through this understanding of context, Darktrace is able to provide detections not based off of any arbitrary values, but is able to assist with things like risk prioritization by considering the uniqueness from one environment to another. And finally, this approach is also paired with misconfigurations. We understand that configurations are a key part to securing your cloud. After all, I think risk is threat that hasn't been acted on. Now, understanding that, we're able to help prioritize misconfigurations as well, incorporating all of the context that I've mentioned. Now, I've done a lot of talking about the product, but I would love to show everyone here what it actually looks like. Diving into it, we can see that Darktrace, from understanding your cloud, we're able to dynamically generate these architecture diagrams, giving context that otherwise would be hard to come across as a security professional, especially when dealing with teams like DevOps and infrastructure, where these architecture diagrams allow for a level of context that isn't afforded by a lot of other solutions that exist today. And we can see that these architecture diagrams aren't just a grouping of resources, but it's understanding what is through configurations that we see in the cloud, as well as live data. So security professionals using these architecture diagrams are not only able to see what resources are grouped together and what resources are able to communicate together, but I think even more importantly, are able to showcase what resources are currently communicating together. Now, I've mentioned earlier that context is key. And part of that context is understanding how different alerts and misconfigurations can impact your architectures. Through this understanding of your cloud, Darktrace is able to actually provide a visualization of this impact through our universal attack path modeling. With this attack path modeling, teams don't need to dig through and don't need to dig for the information to try to understand how a resource can impact other aspects of the cloud, but this information is now presented to them live. I've been doing a lot of talking about presenting the information, but I want to emphasize here that Darktrace truly is understanding your cloud. Through understanding this architecture, Darktrace is able to prioritize which alerts, whether it be anomalous behavior or a misconfiguration, is detrimental to your architecture. Looking at any of the architectures that Darktrace Cloud provides, it will always showcase that highest priority alert using things like resource relationships and impact that I was highlighting earlier. But I think as important as visibility and as detection is, response is just as important. And the ability to respond is just as important. Through Darktrace's unique approach, we're able to actually provide proportionate response based on this anomalous activity that Darktrace Cloud observes. And this is a far cry from the traditional ways that we respond in the cloud that are very manual, where a lot of the time it's associated with things like writing manual playbooks or writing manual functions or triggers. Who's this? Hello? Hello? It seems that I think we were seeing a little bit of static with the earlier microphone setup. I hope everyone can still hear me. But like I was mentioning, response historically has been very manual in its approach. With Darktrace Cloud, our self-learning AI is able to provide not just proportionate, but autonomous response for all the different resources within your cloud environment. So long gone are the days where security teams have to manually think about use case and manually create all the different playbooks and functions for those use cases. But like I said earlier, configurations are key. Again, risk is just threat that hasn't been acted on. So understanding that Darktrace is taking all of this great context and the way that we're able to prioritize a lot of these alerts, and we're implementing that into how we prioritize misconfigurations as well, where based on things like understanding impact, we're able to showcase and show security teams which misconfigurations should be looked at first. to make sure and ensure that we're minimizing the amount of impact on the event that there is any anomalous behavior down the line. Now, all of this is to say, at the crux of this is the self-learning AI. With our approach, we truly are understanding your environment and your business from the ground up. Taking this into the context of the cloud, Darktrace's self-learning AI is able to learn, adapt, and therefore defend all of the different architectures across the entirety of your AWS environment, all in real time. So regardless of whether you're at the beginning of your cloud journey, beginning to migrate resources to the cloud, or you're completely cloud native with an incredibly large footprint in the cloud, in either case, I think Darktrace's approach offers an unparalleled level of prevention, detection, and response. And with that, I am open to Q&A if anyone has any questions.